Hi, everyone. I'm here with Jocelyn Mondragon, or otherwise known as Jocy of the Dragons. You should definitely check out her YouTube videos. I love it. And so you describe yourself as a Latinx Chicana with a disability you probably can't pronounce. And that disability is arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. I kind of want to open the floor for you just to introduce yourself.
So my name is Jocelyn Mondragon. I go by Jocy at Jocy of the Dragons. I'm a disability activist, content creator, speaker, model, aspiring actress, and I start hashtags, I write essays, I do lots of interviews, features, and I love to create like my own little videos and my own pictures and photo shoots and everything. I do a lot.
So the first topics I kind of wanted to go over were about childhood. With arthrogryposis, there are 300 to 400 different varieties, so everyone has their own story. I would like to know what was growing up with arthrogryposis like.
So I grew up having tons of surgeries, tons of physical therapy, and I also grew up in the very deep south of Louisiana, which means that I had no access to like wheelchair transportation. The community around me was also pretty ableist towards disabled people, and especially me, because I was pretty much the only wheelchair user growing up all through the education system. So I would say I grew up very isolated, not having many friends, but in a way for me to like I guess find myself today, I watched lots of movies, lots of books. I would watch my sisters, like they would do their makeup and their hair. I never believed I could do those things. When I was in college, I decided to do these things, not because like I wanted to like feel beautiful with these things, but I never allowed myself to explore these things. So I got into fashion, skincare, beauty, and it's just my favorite thing to play with now.
I love that. And I think ableism kind of creates a like impression of exclusion in that sort of space. So I love kind of like the boudoir shoot that you did and a lot of these like fashion posts that you put on Instagram. You really show that, anyone can do it.
Well, the thing is, that's what I also say on my Instagram and on my social media is that as a disabled person, it's so hard to exist because we're going through all of these things and like society is so against us. And I always try to remind people that I do this publicly, but I was also very shy in high school. I didn't talk to that many people. I became a little bit more extroverted, like actually right when I started my Instagram. Existing even privately, that's very important and valid.
So, simultaneously with finding identity in culture and disability can also be quite difficult. Can you tell me about kind of your Latino upbringing?
I'm really glad we're talking about this because it actually took me a while to really understand like intersectionality and how being Latina and then being disabled intersected. And then I guess I was talking to like, I met a lot of white disabled people through our community. And I realized like, oh my gosh, our experiences are kind of like not the same in the way that like we grow up thinking about all of these things that our families think about, for example, like money or like where to live or like the people around our community and who's actually there to support us. So that was a very interesting thing to learn later on. And I guess being disabled and Latina to me just it felt very empowering because I was bringing like two stories into one, especially I think in visibility. We don't see a lot of disabled people of color like out there like on the screen, and it's very empowering to see other people.
I think intersectionality really enriches the story of we're just not dealing with disability, but there's so much more outside of like the diagnosis.
With our culture, it's mainly like disabled people are very infantilized or treated as kids, but more in the like, let me take care of you like constantly 24/7. And then we're also very isolated from our communities and even sometimes family, we're isolated. At least growing up with my mom, she did isolate me quite a bit. And it was more of she was also a single parent, a Mexican woman in the south of Louisiana. Like she had no community or access around her, even like with the language barrier. So that is the way that I grew up and experienced it. It took me a while to learn English. I think it took me at least 2 years, but that's what really experiences the infantilization, being treated as kids. And that still goes on for me even now as a 27-year-old, which is frustrating because like I do all of these things and people are still treating me like a little kid. I have like a couple of family members, like I love them, bless their hearts. But for Christmas, they gifted me like unicorn pajama pants. And not that I have anything against unicorns because I love rainbows and all of
Yeah.
color, but like they know like my style, my attitude. They know how old I am, and it's like my sister's got like gift cards to like Starbucks, and not to be that Starbucks person, but I love iced coffee. It's my thing.
Girl, same.
That infantilization just sometimes it kind of messes with you. And I hate trying to prove myself to people, but I find that that's what I'm doing a lot is that I'm trying to like, hey, I'm 27-year-old. Don't treat me like a kid.
But I think that's also like a very common theme that I've heard in a lot of disability identity stories of when we are born into the world, we have an identity already like prescribed to us by the rest of the population.
We talked a little bit about that in my Encanto article, growing up being disabled and not feeling like I have roles, like there's roles in our families and expectations.
Yeah.
It's not really spoken, but it's known like these roles and expectations that we kind of have to follow, or at least that we put ourselves into sometimes. And growing up Latina, I also felt like I didn't really have anything to give to my family because my sisters would help out with the house, they would help out with everyone, and I couldn't really physically do that. I think at sometimes with the infantilization, it's like my family doesn't think I contribute. Now they do. My mom, my siblings, and everybody does. But that was definitely like another part of the disabled y Latinx thing that I went through.
Specifically in that article for, I believe it was for disability visibility, you kind of state like the able body values conflicted with your disability. It's kind of funny where like able body values and concepts are trying to kind of mold the disability experience, which is it's not at all the case. But I love in the article at the same time where I believe a lot of your contributions were focused on like the financial aspect or like finding like housing and stuff like that. Really understanding that the mind itself and being able to use your brain power in that context is also very impactful and could be a huge contribution. So I kind of want to get more into your activism and the work that you do currently. I've seen that you have spoken at Tulane University. You were talking about how you created like safe spaces or hosted safe spaces for ableist normalization and awareness, the true project with upgrade accessibility. And also
Mhm.
another thing I would love to talk about too, disability, sexuality, and pride with Anjali Chakra. Starting with the ableist normalization, what have you learned through those talks?
So it kind of started where I was a kid, I wasn't really allowed to like talk about these things, or at least I felt there was no space to. And then as I grew into a young adult, I started talking to the disability community and we were talking about ableism. But I realized that there was a space where it was difficult for us to admit to each other like we're still struggling with it. And it's because of the these situations and like how society makes us feel. So I started the I am ableist hashtag for disabled people and me to come together and talk about our experiences and like how we feel. And it wasn't like about like judging each other, it was more about showing compassion each other and showing that there is a safe space for us to talk about it, and it's okay if we're still struggling with our disabilities. You're allowed to feel all of these things and you're not less than if you're still struggling with your disability. I still have my moments, as positive as I am on social media, like I still have really difficult moments, and I always try to show that it's okay to show these moments and it's also okay to talk about it.
But I also think that's like the hardest part too, is just like initiating or catalyzing that discussion. I really appreciate your work on trying to create those spaces in very uncomfortable contexts. In addition to culture and like Latinidad, I also wanted to talk about like disability, sexuality, and pride. That I found that talk very interesting too. I think that's also part of it where like sexuality is not even talked about so much with disability. And I'm like, we are adults, you know? That's also part of our lives. I saw your video about going on Tinder, talking about dating a bit. I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about that experience and what have you found more successful when talking about disability, but also like in a dating situation?
Well, at first when I was approaching dating, kind of like I didn't really know how to do it. So at first, I just found just putting it in my bio was just getting it out there and making it easy. And then I
Yeah.
realized sometimes, like, I don't need to share with the world my medical history. I don't need to share that with like random guys I may never talk to. For me, dating and like talking about my disability or and even opening it up, I realized then that I'm only going to open it to like people who I guess are worthy of like hearing about it. I'm not just going to share it with a stranger. I'm going to share it with somebody I at least feel comfortable with. For me, talking about disability and through relationships or even on like online dating, it's something that does and doesn't have to be disclosed. The person has an option to disclose it if they want to or if they don't. I remember once somebody told me like, you're catfishing if you don't tell them right away. And it's like, no. They don't tell me everything about themselves right away. Like, I don't have to do that. So why do we have to share everything about ourselves like right away? And not to keep bringing in Disney movies, but I don't know if you saw, I think it was Pixar or Disney, Luca. The father has a disability. And I remember this was a conversation where like he didn't talk about it at all. Like it wasn't brought up. He was just a disabled character. It's okay people want to talk about their disabilities, but it's also okay if you don't want to talk about it. You know, yourself is already in a radical active existence. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. I just felt that's such a huge and power thing that we don't really talk about. It's like, stop trying to force disabled people to tell you about themselves. Can't they just be disabled?
Exactly. And we have so much more to offer, which brings me to education. I believe it was in Now This that I saw a video of you talking about how pre-pandemic, the school wasn't necessarily keen on providing remote classes or a virtual experience. But then after the pandemic, everyone switched into the whole virtual experience very easily. What are your thoughts on that?
It was an accidental rant on Twitter, and then it just went big from there. It was honestly one of the hardest things in my like education, because I've already dealt with like a lot of ableism, and I didn't really have like any allies. I hadn't really talked to the disability community back then. It kind of felt isolating. So when this thing happened with my grad school, I was like, heck no, I'm not letting this go. I'm gonna say something. I guess where it ended up at was that I explained my situation, how I wasn't being accommodated in my second semester, and I was being accommodated in my first one. And then they immediately just cut it off from there and didn't give me the same accommodations. He said a month later, the corona really happens. I'm seeing all of these accommodations from these students. Yeah, so I went through that, and it was very traumatizing to even like go through that, because I had to deal with like the school, I had to deal with like the legal stuff, and then I had to deal with my peers who, like, some of them felt like I wasn't being completely vocal during that time. And it's like when you're the only disabled person, sometimes it feels isolating to advocate for yourself. And again, I wasn't there to be an advocate, I was there to be a student. So it's kind of like I was put in the spot of having to be both.
I think that's one of the hardest things about having a disability. I think we often get put into the space of have to really advocate for ourselves. That is difficult. And you're talking about how living in Louisiana, the public infrastructure is very inaccessible. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
There's only one way to go, like up Louisiana and to go down Louisiana. It's just, it feels like one road sometimes. It's a very tight knit community. There are accessible cars or vans, but it's kind of difficult to get on those because you have to go through the whole process of applying for those, going to your doctor. I come from a single parent home, so it's hard for my mom to take off work all the time to go to all of these multiple meetings. Also, there isn't really anywhere for me to go down the bayou. It all felt inaccessible, and including with like school events, I was always isolated, and like they would make wheelchair users sit in one area, and then they would have like everybody else sit up on the benches. It was a lot of like things like that was inaccessible.
And I think there's so many fixes to a lot of the places that we want to go. I think it's also really important to push accessibility just because we still want to experience the outside world, you know? It's very important that you continue to speak up, which I'm very excited just to see what the future holds for you down the road.
Growing up, I had so many dreams and so many things that I envisioned myself doing. Maybe it's still me going through my childhood, but I want to do all of that now. So I'm going to keep pursuing like all of my content creating. I want to do more modeling, acting. One thing that I always talk about on social media is that we're always so focused on advocating for ourselves because we have to. And there's not really any space for us to pursue our dreams, our joys. If you can, like, do it if you can. And you know, I'm 27. It took me a long time to get here. I tried doing what every able-bodied person in my life told me to do. I tried going to school. I tried, you know, getting a job. I tried doing all of these things. And because of how ableist and because of how inaccessible everything was to me, I never succeeded in any of these things. And like the ways I have succeeded, it has always been in media. It has always been on YouTube. And I didn't need to leave my room to be able to do these things. I want to keep pursuing like the things that are bringing me joy, the things that I'm good at.
You are creating space and creating your own opportunity. So I kind of want to get into our next segment. We dive deep into everyone's Instagrams and we get like 3 photos, and you kind of tell us the story behind it or like the context behind it.
So this was at the Runway of Dreams. It was usually they have a modeling show like every fashion week every year at New York, but this was the first time ever they came over to Hollywood. I was invited to be a part of it, and it was
Wow.
amazing. I was wearing Zappos. I didn't pick that outfit. They actually picked it for me. I don't know if they were getting that vibe from me on my Instagram, but I was totally feeling it. I loved it.
And did you get to keep the clothes?
I did. I got to keep everything.
Yes.
The pants are actually mine. They originally wanted me to wear a skirt, but I wasn't feeling it. And but I was wearing my leather black pants the day of fitting. So they're like, "Can
Wow.
you just keep them on?" And I was like, "Yes, definitely. I'll bring it back." I actually had to buy new pants that same day to leave my black leather pants there. It was a full day event. I think we got there like around 10 a.m. and then it went all the way almost until 10 p.m. because a lot of people stayed late. It was really quick. I only had one change of outfit, so that was fine with me. But we had like 2 or 3 practice runs. It was really fun. I remember, well, this is my second time driving this wheelchair. So the whole time I'm doing the practice runs, I'm like thinking, drive straight, drive straight, drive straight. Don't go off the runway. Thankfully, it all went well during the end. I didn't, wreck into anyone.
Well, it looked really fun. All right, last picture. Freaking love the vibes. Tell me more.
Oh, I miss my hair. I'm growing it out. So this is my keep staring sweater. Hashtag people too. That was a hashtag I started, basically about activism and disabled people, equity and equality and making sure that our rights are always met. It's real. Like we're in 2022. We should have all of these things by now. But the post is actually based off of a book that I was writing that I kind of still am, but I keep posting what I'm gonna put in the book and keep posting it on my social media. So I wrote this. I didn't think it would be, well received by the community, but I'm really glad that it was well received and a lot of people liked it.
I love the vibe of this picture. You are so bold in just like who you are in this. Is this the same place that you also did the boudoir photo shoot too?
Yes, it is. I love working with this photographer, Breakfast at Brittany's. She's actually a friend of my big sister. We're always creating different things together. I actually had my Halloween photo shoot with her, which I try to do every year.
Yeah.
It was really nice and special to work with her.
And last part, we have a lot of people in our AMC community who are still trying to find themselves, are navigating their own struggles, how to talk about disability in a way that makes you feel comfortable, but also like challenges people and their perspectives.
Definitely try to be around disabled people, listen to their stories, listen to them, and also feel free to share your story. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do things. Do what you want. Live your life how you want, is what I say.
I
It's
love
okay.
that.
It's okay to struggle and to show struggle. You don't have to like keep up this facade of always being strong, never giving into your disability. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not be able to do things. I hope you accept those things that you can't do, but you also remember all the things that you can do and be proud of everything that you are because you're very important. Your whole story and existence is important to this world.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. And on behalf of AMCSI, we really appreciate your time. We can't wait to see what the future holds for you. And just know that you are part of the AMCSI family forever.
Thank you for having me. I really love speaking with our community. It's one of the best things for me.
Thank you. And I hope you have a great day.